This brownies recipe will become your new favorite. And the best part is that they're not only delicious, but very easy to make. I start first by lining an 8-inch square pan with parchment paper. I have a video showing how easy this is to do. Next, I take semi-sweet baking chocolate. This is the kind I use. I get it from Whole Foods, but you can use whatever type you like. I go ahead and take all the little packages and break them up into little pieces and put them inside of the bowl. I really try to do all of the preparation steps first because this is what really helps speed up the brownies while I'm making it. Once I have all the baking chocolate broken up into little pieces, I set it aside. Next, I take some instant coffee and I add some hot water to it. We use decaf instant coffee, just our preference, but you can use really whatever type you like. The coffee is what's going to really enhance the chocolate flavor inside of the brownies. So I make the coffee, mix it, and then set that aside for later as well. Then I go ahead and get my flour. I add some all-purpose flour to the bowl, followed by some baking powder, and then I go ahead and use some sea salt. The kind I use, I have to grind it up, so I basically do this repeatedly and put a little bit in a bowl and kind of gather it up. It's important to use sea salt because the salt granules are bigger compared to regular table salt. So this recipe specifically asks for sea salt, and that's what I use. Once I go ahead and put all the designated amount of salt inside, I'm basically going to go ahead and kind of mix all of these dry ingredients together. And as expected, I'll just set this aside for later. Next, I'm going to grab 2 eggs. It doesn't really matter if they're room temperature because they're going to be sitting out for a while. Then I add some vanilla extract and I go ahead and beat it all together. And then of course, when I'm done, set it aside to use later. The first step to make the brownies batter is to melt some unsalted butter in a medium-sized pot. I usually do this on low to medium-low heat. I'll go ahead and allow the butter to melt completely and then mix it around and then prepare to add my sugars. So I use both some brown sugar that I go ahead and add to the pot, followed by some white granulated sugar. And then I mix everything together to stir it around. You're basically kind of making this caramel type sauce. I mix with a spatula for a little while just to get it nice and smooth before I prepare to add the instant coffee. Now I go ahead and mix the coffee because it's been sitting for a little while and then add it to the pot. Now again, I mix everything around with a spatula and you can see that it's starting to boil and bubble around the edges. It looks pretty smooth. At this point, once I see it's nice and smooth, I actually turn up the heat a little bit, just to medium or so, until I start to see it bubble around the edges. And then at this point, I'll go ahead and see that my sauce is done. So I'll turn off the stove, go ahead and stir it around one last time, and I take it off the heat. Immediately, I'll take this hot caramel mixture off the stove and pour it directly over the chocolate. This is going to really help the chocolate melt nicely. So I pour it all, and then I'm actually going to let it sit just for about 1 minute undisturbed. This will just nicely melt the chocolate again. After the minute, I go ahead and take a spatula and go ahead and kind of stir everything around. You can see it doesn't look entirely smooth at this point. That's okay. But I still just go ahead and mix it really, really well just to get everything nice and incorporated. So I let it sit for another 5 minutes. That's just because I'm about to add the eggs and I don't want the chocolate mixture to be too hot and sort of scramble or cook my eggs. So now I go ahead and add the eggs and vanilla mixture inside, and then I mix it all together again. You'll see that once you add the eggs and vanilla mixture and then switch to using a whisk to mix, the mixture starts to look a lot smoother. So take the time to really go ahead and whisk it all together and you'll see a really nice, smooth brownies batter. Next, I'm going to be adding the dry ingredients. So you can go ahead and do this all at once or a little at a time, whatever you prefer. Basically, take the time to really whisk it all together just to let the batter completely form. After some time, you'll see a beautiful batter just like this, nice and chocolatey. So the next step to take the batter fully to the next level is to add some dark chocolate chunks. You can also use chocolate chips, but we like dark chocolate chunks, so that's what we add. We add a good amount and then we take the spatula and just kind of fold all the chocolate chunks into the batter. Next, we go ahead and grab our prepared pan and then pour the brownies mixture into the pan. This really ends up being a very rich, decadent brownies batter, which is great. It's also more of a fudgy type of brownie because that's what we like. This is not a cakey brownie. It's really just a kind of rich, fudgy brownie. Perfect, in my opinion. So after I took 10 years to add every single drop of this batter inside of the pan, I go ahead and try and kind of flatten it out. I try just kind of like shimmying the pan around. Doesn't really work so successfully. So next I just basically start using my spatula to kind of like just flatten it out a bit. Do whatever you want. I just really want to try and get it kind of flat and, make sure that there's still a good amount of batter in all the corners and everything. So I take some time to just do this quickly. And then after some time, I'm done. The final step is baking the brownies. I put them into an oven that was preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. When I take them out to check, after 35 minutes, they're perfect. Now, you can use a toothpick test, especially around the edges. You'll notice that it does come out clean or with very few fudgy pieces. I allow the brownies to cool completely before attempting to cut. You can see here it moves as one whole piece, and that basically allowed it to cool completely. Cut them into however many pieces you like. Sometimes I cut them into 16 pieces, other times I cut them into 12. And you're basically done. These will be the most delicious brownies you will ever taste, and you will love them. This recipe actually is my husband's recipe. We had a little brownie competition for some time about who could create the best brownies recipe. I was a little sad, to finally have to admit defeat when I tasted his, but I am happy that I can share this amazing recipe with you. Just a few tips. You can't always rely on the toothpick test because this recipe does have a lot of chocolate chunks inside. So you could insert the toothpick in the middle and it could come out very chocolatey and be full to think it's not done. But it really actually is done. So just be careful with that. Also remember, it's best to store all your brownies at room temperature in an airtight container. I promise this will be your go-to recipe from now on for fudgy brownies. We're happy to share it.